You'll birth me sons every year with that body, Virgin Duke declared to Obese servant. The words thunder across the candlelit hall, silencing laughter and leaving a maid frozen with shame. A nobleman, untouched by any woman, has chosen this moment to mock the servant everyone overlooks. But, as church bells toll in the distance, something shifts because this maid holds a secret locked inside a locket that could change everything. Dust rises on the village road, whispers race faster than a rider's horse. And what began as humiliation turns into scandal that could ruin an entire estate. A forbidden courtship, a hidden bloodline, a dangerous choice between pride and love. And when the servant dares to stand tall against the noble world that mocks her will, his cruel prophecy become the truth that binds them forever. Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The grand hall of Radcliffe Manor blazed with the light of hundreds of beeswax candles, their warm glow reflecting off polished silver and crystal. Noble ladies in silk gowns and gentlemen in fine coats filled the long tables, their laughter and chatter echoing against the oak-paneled walls. Servants wove between the tables with practiced grace, bearing heavily laden trays of roasted meats and delicate pastries. Among them moved Martha Whitcomb, her sturdy frame carrying 3 loaded platters with the skill born of years of service. Though sweat dampened her collar, her movements remained steady and precise. The scullery boys, lounging near the kitchen entrance, snickered as she passed. Watch the floorboards creak. One called in a stage whisper, earning cruel chuckles from his fellows. Martha kept her eyes forward, her face composed despite the familiar sting of mockery. She had long since learned that dignity was her best shield against their barbs. The weight of the trays pressed against her palms as she approached the high table where the young Duke of Radcliffe sat with his uncle, Lord Hawthorne. "You cannot delay much longer," Lord Hawthorne was saying, his stern voice carrying despite his attempt at discretion. "The estate needs heirs. Every eligible lady in the county has been paraded before you." The Duke, handsome but clearly weary of the topic, took a long drink from his goblet. "Perhaps none of these delicate flowers suit my purposes, Uncle. What I need is—" His eyes fell on Martha as she carefully set down a platter of glazed peacock. A sudden gleam of mischief lit his face, fueled by wine and frustration. "Why? There's your answer." He raised his voice, ensuring it would carry across the hall. "A woman like Martha could birth me sons every year with that body. Built for breeding, wouldn't you say?" The hall erupted in laughter. Ladies tittered behind their fans while gentlemen guffawed openly. The servants barely concealed their own amusement. The scullery boys nearly doubled over by the kitchen door. Martha's hands trembled slightly on the empty tray, but she kept her spine straight. Lord Hawthorne's face darkened with disapproval. "Your humor does you no credit, nephew." But the Duke, caught up in his jest, and the crowd's reaction continued with exaggerated gallantry. "What say you, Martha? Shall we solve the succession crisis together?" The laughter swelled again. Martha turned slowly to face the Duke, meeting his eyes directly. In that moment, the hall seemed to still, waiting for her response. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying in the sudden hush. "Your Grace does me too much honor," she said evenly, "but I fear I must decline. You see, I have somewhat higher standards for the father of my children than a man who would mock a servant to amuse his guests." The silence that followed was absolute. The Duke's smile faltered, then faded entirely as the quiet dignity in her words struck home. He saw her then, really saw her, not the figure of fun he'd made her into, but a woman of grace under fire, showing more nobility in her composure than he had in his cruel jest. Lord Hawthorne half rose from his seat, outrage plain on his face. But Martha had already executed a perfect curtsy and turned away. She moved through the still silent hall, her head high, her steps measured. The scullery boys shrank back from her path, their earlier mockery forgotten in their astonishment. The Duke watched her go, the wine's pleasant fog clearing from his mind, replaced by an uncomfortable clarity. He saw the straight line of her, shoulders unbowed despite the humiliation he had heaped upon her. He noticed the way other servants nodded to her as she passed, respect in their gestures. And he recognized, with growing discomfort, the contrast between her dignified response and his own childish behavior. As Martha disappeared through the kitchen door, conversation slowly resumed in the hall, though more subdued than before. But the Duke remained distracted, his eyes repeatedly drawn to the door through which she had departed. His uncle had resumed his lectures about suitable matches and the importance of lineage, but the Duke barely heard him. Instead, he was troubled by the memory of Martha's steady gaze and the quiet strength that had put him thoroughly in his place. As the feasting concluded and nobles drifted toward the manor's drawing rooms, Martha worked efficiently to clear the remnants of their excess. Her cheeks still burned from the Duke's cruel jest, but she held her head high, focusing on the familiar rhythm of stacking plates and gathering silver. Girl called a commanding yet kindly voice. "Come here, if you please." Martha turned to find the Dowager Duchess of Ashcombe regarding her with sharp, intelligent eyes. The elderly woman sat straight-backed in her chair, her silver hair elegantly arranged beneath a lace cap, her blue silk gown rustling as she gestured Martha closer. "Your Grace." Martha curtsied deeply, keeping her eyes lowered as proper. "I require assistance preparing for bed this evening." The dowager's mouth curved in a slight smile. "You handled yourself with remarkable poise earlier. I should like to have someone sensible attend me tonight." Several nearby servants paused in their work, casting curious glances. It was unusual for a noble lady to request a kitchen maid service over her own lady's maid. Martha felt their stares but maintained her composure. "I would be honored, Your Grace." Later that evening, Martha helped the dowager in her chambers, the room warm from a crackling fire. She moved carefully through her tasks, unpinning the lady's elaborate hairstyle, helping her from her heavy gown and laying out a fresh night shift. "You have gentle hands," the dowager remarked, settling into her chair as Martha brushed out her long silver hair, "and a gentle spirit, despite their cruelty below stairs." "Your Grace is kind to notice," Martha replied softly, focusing on working out a stubborn tangle as Martha gathered the discarded clothing. Something metal glinted beneath the silk gown. She picked up a delicate golden locket, its surface worn, smooth from years of handling. Her heart nearly stopped when it fell open in her palm. There, painted in miniature, was her mother's face, younger than Martha had ever known her, but unmistakable. The same warm brown eyes, the same gentle smile that had comforted Martha throughout childhood. On the reverse side, an intricate coat of arms was etched into the gold. Martha's hands trembled. Her mother had never spoken of her past, taking whatever secrets she held to her early grave. But Martha remembered, finding her sometimes crying over old letters she would quickly hide away. "What have you found there, child?" The dowager's voice cut through Martha's shock. She looked up to find the older woman watching her intently. Forgive me, Your Grace. I believe this belongs to you." Martha moved to hand over the locket, but the dowager was already reaching for her spectacles, her expression keen with interest. "Let me see that crest," she commanded softly. Martha placed the locket in her outstretched hand, heart pounding as the dowager examined it closely. Something shifted in the elderly woman's face, recognition followed by calculation. "Most interesting," she murmured, studying Martha's features with new intensity. "Most interesting indeed. You may keep this tonight, child. We shall speak more of it tomorrow." Later, in the quiet darkness of the servants' quarters, Martha lay on her narrow pallet bed, the locket clutched tightly in her hand. The weight of it felt both foreign and familiar, like a key to a door she never knew existed. Could there be noble blood in her veins? The possibility seemed too fantastic to contemplate, yet the evidence lay cold against her palm, she thought. Of her mother, how she had carried herself with quiet dignity despite their poverty. How she had insisted Martha learn to read and write alongside her household duties. Had she once moved in grander circles? The questions tumbled through Martha's mind as she traced the worn edges of the locket. Torn between the wild hope of belonging somewhere and the fear of discovering truths that might hurt more than comfort, the night deepened around her, punctuated by the soft breathing of other sleeping servants. Martha held the locket close to her heart, her mother's painted eyes seeming to hold secrets she had never dared to share. Sleep was long in coming, but the locket remained safely in her grasp until dawn began to paint the sky beyond the small window. The first rays of dawn crept through the manor's tall windows, casting long shadows across the great hall where servants scurried about with brooms and cloths. The air still held traces of last night's feast, lingering scents of roasted meats and spilled wine mingled with fresh morning air from opened windows. "Did you hear what His Grace said about Martha?" whispered Jane, a young scullery maid, as she gathered fallen flower petals from beneath the tables, about her being fit to bear sons. "Hush now," answered Mrs. Brooks. The housekeeper, though her stern look did little to quell the excited chatter among the staff. By breakfast time, the tale had spread through every corner of Radcliffe's manor. Carried on quick feet and eager tongues, in the stables, grooms shared the story with merchants delivering fresh goods. By mid-morning, the village buzzed with whispers. Of the Duke's shocking declaration about the kitchen maid, Phil laughed. Others clucked their tongues in disapproval. But all agreed it was most improper for a noble to speak so of a servant. The news reached Lord Hawthorne's ears as he broke. His weathered face darkened with each word his valet shared. Within the hour, he summoned his nephew to the family council chamber, where portraits of stern-faced ancestors looked down upon them. "Have you lost your senses?" Lord Hawthorne's voice cut through the musty air. "Your jest has become the talk of 3 parishes. A duke cannot be heard speaking so familiarly about the help." The young duke shifted in his chair. His usual confidence dimmed. "It was merely a moment of sport, uncle. Surely it will pass." "It will not pass," said Lady Catherine, his aunt, from her seat by the window. "Already, letters arrive questioning your judgment. Your reputation, our family name, hangs by a thread." Lord Hawthorne paced the carpet, his boots silent on the thick wool. "There is but one way to salvage this mess. You must court the girl in appearance only. Mind Ewan till the scandal fades. Show yourself a gentleman who speaks of marriage with purpose, not loose humor. Court Martha." The Duke's face reddened. "But she is the subject of your public declaration," his uncle cut in. "And now you must make it seem intentional, or risk becoming the laughingstock of the peerage." Within the hour, Martha received a summons to the Duke's study. She entered with quiet dignity, her work-worn hands clasped before her plain dress. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced between them. "Miss Whitcomb," the Duke began, standing behind his massive desk, "I find myself in need of your ... assistance." He explained the situation, watching her face carefully. "You would be compensated handsomely for your cooperation." Martha's chin lifted slightly. "Your Grace honors me with this request," she said, her voice steady. "But I cannot accept payment for what is simply my duty to the household." A pause. "Then I will help quiet this storm, but not for coin." The Duke's eyebrows rose, surprise flickering across his features. "You agree then?" "I do," Martha replied. "Though perhaps next time your Grace jests, he might choose a subject less likely to harm the family's standing." That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Martha walked beside the Duke through the manor's formal gardens. Her heart thundered beneath her bodice, aware of the many eyes watching from windows and hedgerows. Servants pretended to trim roses nearby, while several noble guests who had lingered after the feast just happened to take their air in the same garden. The Duke's steps were stiff, his shoulders tense beneath his fine coat. Martha kept her eyes forward, focusing on the crunch of gravel beneath her feet rather than the whispers that followed their progress. They passed the fountain, its gentle splashing a counterpoint to their awkward silence. The roses bloom well this year, the Duke said finally, his voice carrying just far enough to reach their observers. Indeed, Your Grace, Martha answered, equally measured. The gardeners take great pride in their care. They completed their circuit of the gardens, in this way exchanging proper but distant pleasantries while the evening grew cooler around them. The tension between them was as solid as the stone walls of Radcliffe's manor itself, built of equal parts reluctance and necessity. As shadows lengthened across the paths, their performance drew to a close. Yet even as they parted ways, the Duke to his private chambers and Martha to the servants' quarters, the weight of their arrangement settled heavily upon them both. This was but the first act in what promised to be a complex charade, one that would test both their patience and their pride. The morning sun warmed the cobblestones of the village square as Martha walked beside the Duke of Radcliffe through the bustling tenants' market. Her plain brown dress and white apron stood in stark contrast to his fine blue coat and gleaming boots. Market-goers whispered behind their hands, their eyes following the unlikely pair. There she goes, the one his Grace jested about. A woman murmured to her companion, not quite softly enough. Martha kept her head high, focusing instead on Widow Thompson's vegetable stand ahead. The elderly woman struggled to sort through withered cabbages, her arthritis-twisted hands trembling. Good morrow, Widow Thompson, Martha called warmly. Those spring onions look particularly fine today. Bless you, Martha, the widow smiled, her weathered face brightening. But I fear the rain spoiled half my crop. The Duke shifted uncomfortably, unused to such common conversation. But Martha stepped forward, examining the vegetables with practiced eyes. If you'll pardon my suggestion, ma'am, the outer leaves may be spotted, but the hearts are sound. Perhaps we could arrange to use them in the manor's kitchens. They'd make excellent soup for the servants' hall. You always did have a good head on your shoulders, girl, Widow Thompson said gratefully as they moved through the market. More villagers approached with their concerns. A dairy farmer worried about grazing rights. A cooper needed timber for repairs. A weaver struggled with wool prices. To each, Martha listened carefully, offering practical solutions drawn from her years of experience in the manor's workings. The Duke watched, growing increasingly thoughtful. Where he would have dismissed their problems as trivial matters beneath his notice, Martha treated each person with genuine attention. Her solutions were simple yet clever, born of real understanding of both the estate's resources and the villagers' needs. Later that afternoon, in the manor study, the Duke's steward presented a land lease for signature. The document would convert common grazing land into private hunting grounds, promising increased revenue. Martha, organizing account ledgers nearby, paused in her work. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "might I speak?" He nodded, surprised by his own curiosity about her thoughts. "That pasture supports 6 families' livestock through winter," she explained. "Without it, they cannot feed their animals. Without animals, they cannot pay their rents come spring." The Duke frowned, studying the document with new eyes. "The steward assures me the profit would more than cover any losses. In coin, perhaps," Martha replied carefully. "But your Grace would lose something far more valuable, the loyalty of good tenants who have worked this land for generations." The Duke set down his quill, considering her words. The steward shifted nervously, but the Duke waved him away, unsigned lease in hand. "You have prevented me from making a grave error," he admitted after the steward departed. "How do you understand these matters so well?" "I listen, Your Grace," Martha answered simply. The greatest wisdom often comes from those we are taught to overlook. That evening, the Duke sat alone in his study, firelight dancing across his features. As he stared into the flames, the day's events troubled his thoughts. Martha's quiet dignity, her natural authority among the common folk. Her shrewd understanding of estate matters all challenged his previous dismissal of her. He recalled how the villagers had looked at her with genuine respect, while they merely bowed to his title. Her compassion had accomplished more than his power ever had, and her gentle correction about the lease had saved him from a costly mistake his pride might have driven him to make. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the wall as he pondered these uncomfortable revelations. Martha Whitcomb was proving to be far more than the simple kitchen maid he had so carelessly mocked. The thought stirred something unexpected in his chest, a reluctant admiration he was not yet ready to acknowledge. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Martha worked the heavy dough against the wooden table. Her strong arms moved in a familiar rhythm, pushing and folding the soft mass while flour dusted the air around her. Other servants darted about their tasks, casting furtive glances her way but keeping their distance. The cruel jests that had followed her for years had dwindled to whispers since her public appearances with the Duke, Mrs. Pike. The cook called out orders with less bite in her voice than usual. "Mind them loaves, don't overproof, Martha. And someone tend to them chickens." The kitchen doors swung open with force, bringing a rush of cool air. The Duke of Radcliffe stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Pots clattered. As they were hastily set down, scullery maid dropped her brush with a splash. The usual bustle of the kitchen froze into stunned silence. "Leave us," the Duke commanded, his voice firm but not unkind. The servants scattered like startled birds, even Mrs. Pike bobbing a quick curtsy before hurrying out. Martha continued, kneading, though her heart thundered in her chest. She could not stop the bread-making now, or the dough would spoil. "Your Grace," she said softly, keeping her eyes on her work. "The kitchen is no place for I came to thank you," he interrupted, stepping closer. "Your counsel about the tenant leases was ... most wise." Martha's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their steady rhythm. "I merely spoke what I observed, Your Grace." The Duke moved to lean against a nearby table, his fine coat gathering flour dust. "You have a way with them, the tenants. The villagers, they trust you." He paused, watching her work. "I never learned that skill. Trust is earned through understanding, Your Grace." Martha turned the dough with practiced ease. "When you know what it means to work the land, to worry over a poor harvest, ... I was raised differently." His voice carried a note of something Martha had never heard before in certainty. "My education focused on estate management, social graces, proper behavior." He gave a short laugh, "particularly regarding ladies." Martha glanced up briefly, catching an unfamiliar vulnerability in his expression. "I made a promise to my mother before she died," he continued quietly, "to remain ... pure until marriage, to honor the sanctity of the union." His cheeks colored slightly. "I've kept that vow, though it's earned me mockery among certain circles." Martha's hands gentled on the dough, touched by his confession. "Such a promise speaks to your character, Your Grace. There is no shame in holding to one's principles, Ajor." The first person who hasn't laughed at that. Kea shifted, dust motes dancing in the sunlight around him. "I find myself wondering if my inexperience with women led to my unfortunate jest that night." "We all speak without thinking at times," Martha replied kindly, seeing past his proud bearing to the lonely man beneath. "What matters is how we make amends." The Duke straightened, something like relief crossing his features. "You have an uncommon wisdom, Martha Whitcomb." Before she could respond, rapid footsteps approached. A messenger burst through the door, red-faced and breathing hard. He bowed hastily, extending a sealed letter. "Urgent message for your grace," he gasped. The Duke broke the seal, his expression darkening as he read. Martha busied herself with shaping the bread into loaves, though she couldn't help noticing how his shoulders tensed. "It seems my cousin, Lady Eugenia, has decided to pay an unexpected visit," he said tightly. "She arrives within the week." Martha's hands trembled slightly as she scored the tops of the loaves. She had heard tales of Lady Eugenia's sharp tongue and sharper ambitions. The kitchen suddenly felt colder despite the warmth of the ovens. The Duke folded the letter with precise movements. "I must make arrangements. Thank you for listening, Martha." He strode from the kitchen, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Martha watched him go, her heart heavy with an emotion she dared not name. Slowly, the other servants trickled back in, their curious gazes burning into her back as she slid the loaves into the oven. The harvest festival transformed the village square into a wonderland of golden light and autumn splendor. Lanterns swayed from ropes strung between buildings, casting warm circles that danced across cobblestones. The air carried the sweet scent of fresh bread and roasted apples, while wreaths of wheat and late-blooming flowers adorned every doorway. Martha stood beside the Duke, her plain brown dress carefully pressed, watching children weave between market stalls with ribbons trailing behind them. Her heart fluttered at the Duke's nearness, though she kept her eyes downcast as villagers passed. Some bowed deeply, others stared openly, and a few even smiled, their usual disdain softened by curiosity. "The decorations are lovely this year," the Duke said, his voice carrying enough to be heard by those nearby. He had been doing this lately, speaking to her as though she were worth hearing. "Indeed, Your Grace, the Miller family always outdoes themselves with the lanterns." Martha gestured toward the elaborate paper creations hanging above. "They spend months preparing them." A group of musicians struck up a lively tune, fiddles and pipes calling people to the center of the square. Couples began to gather, forming lines for a country dance. Martha stepped back, preparing to watch from the shadows as she had done every year before, but the Duke turned to her, extending his hand. "Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Whitcomb?" The square fell silent. Martha's breath caught in her throat. Even the musicians faltered for a moment before continuing their melody. "Your Grace," she whispered, "surely you cannot mean—" "I do mean it." His eyes held something new, determination, perhaps, or defiance. "Dance with me." With trembling fingers, Martha placed her hand in his. The crowd parted as he led her to the dancing space, whispers rising like autumn leaves in a breeze. She felt every eye upon them, the baker's wife, with her mouth agape, the blacksmith crossing his arms, young ladies pressing handkerchiefs to their lips. The dance began awkwardly. Martha knew the steps, she had watched them countless times, but her size made her movements hesitant. The Duke, for all his noble upbringing, seemed equally unsure, his usual grace giving way to careful attention. But as the music flowed around them, something shifted. Martha found her rhythm, and the Duke's hand on her waist grew more confident. They turned together, her skirts swishing against his legs, and when she caught his eye, she saw not mockery, but wonder. "You move well," he murmured as they came together in the figure. "As do you, Your Grace," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. Their next turn brought them beneath the largest lantern, its light bathing them in golden warmth. The Duke's steps slowed, though the music played on. His hand tightened on hers, drawing her closer than the dance required. "Martha," he breathed, and it was the first time he had spoken her given name. Before she could respond, he bent and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, tentative, tasting of spiced wine and possibility. For one heartbeat, then two, the world fell away. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his hand at her waist, and the soft glow of lantern. The spell broke at the sound of carriage wheels on cobblestones. They parted, both flushed and breathless, as a fine black carriage pulled by four matched grays rolled into the square. The vehicle bore the Fairfax family crest, its polish gleaming in the lantern light. The carriage door opened, and Lady Eugenia Fairfax emerged like a storm cloud at sunset. Her traveling dress was the latest London fashion, her dark curls arranged perfectly despite the journey. Her sharp eyes found Martha immediately, narrowing with such contempt that Martha felt the chill of it across the square. "Cousin, lady," Eugenia called out, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent crowd. "What a quaint gathering I find you attending." Her gaze raked over Martha once more, lips curling in unmistakable disdain. The lantern light suddenly seemed dimmer. The music faded to nothing, and the joy that had filled the square only moments before dissipated like morning mist. Martha stood, frozen, the ghost of the Duke's kiss still warm on her lips, as Lady Eugenia's arrival cast its shadow over the Harvest Festival's golden hour. The drawing room of Radcliffe Manor glowed with candlelight, its elegant furnishings a stark backdrop to the small gathering of nobles. Martha stood near the hearth, her hands clasped tightly before her. Though she wore her best dress, modest brown wool, carefully mended, seemed dull beside Lady Eugenia's shimmering blue silk. "Your Grace," Lady Eugenia's voice cut through the murmured conversations. "Pray tell us how you discovered such an unusual companion." Her lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. The Duke cleared his throat, his posture stiff. "Miss Whitcomb has shown remarkable wisdom in estate matters." "Indeed." Lady Eugenia circled Martha like a cat stalking. "Pray, and what would a kitchen maid know of managing estates?" Several nobles tittered behind their hands. Martha lifted her chin. "I've learned much from listening to the tenant farmers, my lady." "How charming." Lady Eugenia's voice dripped with honey-coated venom. "Though I wonder if you learned such airs from your father, the notorious James Whitcomb, who fled his creditors in the night." The room fell silent. Martha's heart stopped for a moment, then resumed beating harder than before. "I see you recognize the name." Lady Eugenia turned to address the room. "My dear uncle kept detailed records of all who borrowed and failed to repay. Your father left quite a string of debts before disappearing. Not quite the noble blood you've been hinting at, is it?" Martha's voice remained steady. "I have never claimed noble blood, my lady. Yet here you stand, attempting to rise above your station." Lady Eugenia's gaze cut to the Duke. "Surely, Your Grace, you cannot seriously entertain such an alliance. Think of your family's reputation, the scandal it would bring." The Duke's uncle, Lord Hawthorne, stepped forward. "The girl has no breeding, no connections. Consider your duty to the estate, nephew." Martha watched as the Duke's face changed, his features hardening into the mask of nobility she had first known. Her heart cracked, knowing what would come next. The Duke straightened, his voice cold and distant. "You speak truly, uncle. I have allowed this charade to continue far too long." He turned to Martha, though his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "You forget your place, Miss Whitcomb. Whatever passing fancy led me to show you attention, it ends now. You are, after all, merely a servant." The words fell like stones in the silent room. Martha felt each one, yet refused to let her pain show. She curtsied deeply, the motion precise and dignified despite her trembling knees. "As you say, Your Grace." Her voice remained clear and steady. "I thank you for your past kindness and bid you good evening." She turned and walked from the room, her steps measured, her back straight. Not until she reached her small chamber in the servants' quarters did she allow herself to breathe deeply, fighting back the tears that threatened in the pre-dawn darkness. Martha packed her few belongings into a small bundle change of clothes, her mother's worn prayer book, and the mysterious locket she had found. The servants' hall was silent. As she made her way to the kitchen, there she left her apron folded neatly on the table, along with a note thanking the cook for her employment. The eastern sky showed only the faintest hint of gray as Martha stepped out the servants' entrance for the last time. The autumn air bit through her wool cloak, and mud sucked at her boots as she started down the long drive. Behind her, Radcliffe Manor's windows slowly brightened with candlelight as the household began to stir. Martha did not look back. Instead, she fixed her eyes on the road ahead, the same road that had brought her here 2 years ago. It would take her most of the day to reach her village, but she would walk it with dignity. Let them whisper and mock, she knew her own worth now, even if others did not. As she passed through the manor gates, the first rays of dawn painted the clouds pink and gold. Martha adjusted her bundle and lengthened her stride. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the glittering halls of nobility. She was, after all, her mother's daughter, and some mysteries of her heritage remained yet to be unraveled. The autumn wind rustled through the village trees as Martha sat by her cottage window, needle flashing in the morning light. Her strong fingers guided the thread through a neighbor's torn shirt with practiced care. Outside, yellow leaves danced across the garden where Aunt Eliza tended her herbs. Child Aunt Eliza called through the open window, her voice warm with concern. Mrs. Cooper from the bakery brought word from the manor again. Martha's hands stilled for a moment. "I trust all is well at Radcliffe, Aunt. They say the Duke has taken to his bed with melancholy." Aunt Eliza's weathered face appeared at the window. "Hasn't been seen at church these 3 Sundays past. Nobles often take such spells," Martha replied, her tone carefully, even as she resumed her stitching. "I am sure his family tends to him well enough." But within the manor's grand walls, the Duke, indeed, languished. His chambers, though luxurious with heavy curtains and fine furnishings, felt more a prison than a sanctuary. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he stared listlessly at the ceiling, remembering Martha's quiet strength at the harvest dance. "Your Grace," his valet murmured, setting down a breakfast tray that would likely go untouched. "Lord Hawthorne asks if you will join the family for dinner this evening." The Duke turned away. "I am indisposed." Alone again, he pressed his fingers to his temples, haunted by the memory of Martha's kiss beneath the festival lanterns. How sweet and pure it had been. How right it had felt despite everything he'd been taught about rank and propriety. The shame of his public rejection burned anew in his chest. In the village, Martha's days fell into a simple rhythm. She mended clothes, helped birth lambs, and mixed healing poultices from Aunt Eliza's herbs. Her hands stayed busy, though her heart ached in quiet moments. The villagers treated her with careful kindness, having heard whispers of her noble blood, but Martha neither confirmed nor denied the rumors. "You've done nothing to be ashamed of," Aunt Eliza reminded her one evening as they shared a humble supper of bread and stew. "The good Lord sees worth beyond titles." "I know, Aunt." Martha smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I learned dignity at your knee, and that cannot be taken from me." At Radcliffe Manor, the Duke sought solace in the family chapel. Moonlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across his kneeling form as he prayed for guidance. The weight of his estate's future pressed heavy on his shoulders. Yet Martha's face haunted his thoughts, her gentle wisdom in the kitchen, her grace, despite mockery, the way she'd made him feel truly seen for the first time in his life. "Lord," he whispered into the silence, "how can duty and desire be so at odds?" What is nobility truly worth if it means destroying what is most noble in spirit? The chapel offered no answer save the quiet echo of his own troubled heart in her cottage. Martha sat darning socks by candlelight when the sound of carriage wheels broke the evening quiet. She looked up. Startled, few carriages ventured down the village lanes, especially after dusk. Aunt Eliza peered out the window, her breath catching. "Child," she said softly, "it's the Dowager Duchess herself." Martha set aside her mending and smoothed her skirts, heart pounding as a firm knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, the Dowager Duchess of Ashcombe stood regally on the threshold, her silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. "My dear," the Dowager said warmly, "may I come in? I bring news that cannot wait until morning." Martha curtsied deeply. "Your Grace honors our humble home. Please enter." The Dowager swept in, carrying a leather document case that seemed to hold significant weight. Her sharp eyes took in the neat but modest surroundings with approval. "I see you keep a proper home," she noted, settling into the chair Martha offered. "But then, I would expect no less from your mother's daughter." She opened the case, removing several sealed papers tied with ribbon. "Speaking of your mother, my dear, these documents prove what I suspected that night you found the locket. Father was indeed Lord Charles Mounthaven, and your mother was his secret wife." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through Martha's cottage windows as she sat across from the Dowager Duchess of Ashcombe. The older woman's silk gown seemed oddly splendid against the humble wooden furniture, yet her warm smile put Martha at ease. Between them on the scarred table lay several yellow documents and the fateful locket. "Your father was Lord Edmund Blackwood," the Dowager said softly, touching a faded letter. "Third son of the Earl of Pembroke. He chose love over title when he married your mother, a merchant's daughter." Martha's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. "But why did mother never speak of this? Pride, my dear. Not the foolish sort that puffs up empty heads at court, but the kind that accepts consequences with dignity." The Dowager's eyes sparkled with understanding. "Your father was disinherited, yes, but he never regretted choosing love. Just as you've shown similar strength in choosing dignity over false favor." Aunt Eliza brought them tea in their best chipped cups, hovering anxiously nearby. The Dowager accepted hers with genuine gratitude that made Martha's aunt blush with pleasure. "But you see, child," the Dowager continued, stirring honey into her tea, "these papers, while interesting, are not why I'm here. I've watched you these past months. Your true nobility shines not from these documents, but from your actions." Martha set down her cup carefully. "I don't understand, your Grace. When the servants mocked you, you showed grace. When the Duke insulted you, you answered with wit rather than spite. When tenants needed help, you gave wisdom freely." The Dowager leaned forward earnestly. "That is the mark of true nobility, not birth, but character." A log shifted in the hearth, sending sparks dancing upward. Martha stared into the flames, remembering nights in the manor kitchen. The Duke's unexpected vulnerability as he spoke of his mother, the warmth of their dance beneath harvest lanterns. "Manor needs you, Martha," the Dowager said gently. "Not because of who your father was, but because of who you are. Will you return with me?" Martha closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before her. "Not for ambition or revenge," she said finally, "but for truth. The truth deserves to be known." The Dowager smiled, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "The carriage awaits whenever you're ready, my dear." Meanwhile, at Radcliffe Manor, the Duke paced his study like a caged lion. When a servant brought word of the Dowager's mission, he stopped abruptly before the window. "She's bringing Martha back." His voice cracked slightly on her name. "Yes, your Grace." The Dowager left orders for the great hall to be prepared for an assembly. The Duke gripped the window frame. watching autumn leaves scatter across the grounds where he had walked with Martha those few precious times. Shame burned in his chest at the memory of his public rejection. "I was a fool," he whispered to his reflection in the glass. "A proud, blind fool." With sudden resolution, he turned to his steward. "Summon the village. Everyone, tenants, merchants, gentry, and send word to my uncle and the council. It's time to set things right, whatever the cost." Servants scurried through the manor's corridors, lighting hundreds of candles in the great hall. Fresh rushes were strewn across the floor. Tapestries were dusted and silver candelabras polished until they gleamed. The hall slowly filled with curious villagers in their Sunday best. Mingling uneasily with perfumed nobles who kept to their own groups, the Duke stood before the great fireplace, his finest coat unable to hide the strain of sleepless nights. His uncle, Lord Hawthorne, watched with obvious disapproval as stable boys and merchants' wives filed into the hall alongside titled ladies. "This is madness," Lord Hawthorne muttered. "You risk everything for a kitchen maid." The Duke squared his shoulders. "No, uncle. I risk everything for the chance to be worthy of her." The great doors swung open, and a hush fell over the crowded hall. The Dowager Duchess of Ashcombe entered, her silver hair gleaming in the candlelight, and beside her walked Martha, straight-backed and calm, her simple gray dress more dignified than the finest silk gowns around her. The assembly held its breath as Martha moved through the parting crowd, her step steady, her eyes fixed ahead. In that moment, even those who had once mocked her saw something that transcended rank or birth. The quiet power of a heart that knew its own worth. The great hall fell silent as the Duke strode forward. To everyone's astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee before Martha, his fine velvet coat touching the rushes on the floor. Gasps echoed through the chamber as nobles witnessed their peer humbling himself before a servant. "Martha Wickham," the Duke's voice rang clear and strong. "What began as a cruel jest has become divine prophecy. That night, I spoke thoughtlessly of your ability to bear heirs. Now I understand that you alone are truly worthy to be there. Mother, not for your form, but for the nobility of your heart and the unwavering dignity of your spirit." Lady Eugenia stepped forward with a sneer, but the Dowager Duchess raised her hand. "Perhaps, Lady Eugenia, you would care to examine these documents." The Dowager's voice carried throughout the hall as she displayed the papers. "These prove Martha's father was Lord Edmund Blackwood, third son of the Earl of Pembroke. Her blood is as noble as yours." Color drained from Lady Eugenia's face as she scanned the documents. Whispers rippled through the crowd as the truth of Martha's heritage spread. The Duke rose to his feet, taking Martha's hand. "Yet bloodline matters not. I renounce the prejudice that blinded me. Before all gathered here, I proclaim Martha Whitcomb as my chosen bride. Let any who would object speak now." The hall held its breath. Lord Hawthorne opened his mouth, then closed it again, seeing the determination in his nephew's eyes. In the silence, a single clap began from a kitchen boy. Then another joined, and another, until the great hall thundered with applause. Servants cheered openly, while nobles joined more reservedly, but the tide of approval was unstoppable. The village vicar stepped forward, beaming. "I shall publish the banns this very Sunday," he declared. 7 days later, the bells of St. Michael's Parish Church pealed joyously across the countryside. Martha emerged into the autumn sunshine, now Duchess of Radcliffe, her hand resting on her husband's arm. Her wedding gown was elegant but simple, reflecting the grace that had won hearts across all ranks of society. A shower of rose petals rained down as they descended the church steps. Former scullery boys tossed flowers alongside baronets' daughters, while ladies-in-waiting smiled at footmen. The old divisions seemed to blur in that moment of celebration, as if a new way of seeing worth had taken root in their corner of England. Thank you for watching. If this one reached you, consider subscribing. I'll be back tomorrow with more meaning, more humanity.